Congressman Mike Waltz is in Florida's 6th District, and he thinks the diplomatic boycott, he's right about this, of the Beijing Olympics is ridiculous. He says it doesn't go far enough, and he says it is disgraceful U.S. companies will rake in millions off the Olympics while whitewashing an ongoing genocide and other atrocities in China. And Mike Waltz joins us now. I agree with you, and I'm a little torn on the issue for this one reason. Is you have athletes, Congressman, they have devoted, in some cases, a decade of their life training for these Olympics. I hate for them to suffer to make a political statement because this has been their dream. That is my only hesitancy. Short of that, I wouldn't have anything to do with China at this point in time.
No, I feel you, Sean, absolutely. And my heart breaks for them, too. And where our anger should be directed is at the morally corrupt IOC, an International Olympic Committee. Myself and a number of others have been asking the IOC for years to move the games. That's the preferred solution. It's the IOC that has put these athletes in this position of choosing between their values and basic humanity and turning a blind eye to that to be able to compete. So that's where our focus should be, is on the IOC.
I don't think most people understand the genocide, the forced labor, the oppression of minorities that's actually going on in modern day China. I don't think most people know what's going on. Why don't you give a quick summary so people understand it?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, hats off to former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who leveled that formal designation of genocide and what's going on, but it's been carried over by the Biden administration. And what's happening is this is an ethnic Muslim people, much like what the Chinese have done to the Tibetans over the years. They have decided to wipe them off the face of the earth. What does that look like? That looks like, and video has now been released. Documents have been leaked showing this was a matter of state policy coming all the way from the top in Beijing, that videos have been released showing these people lined up on their knees, heads shaved, loaded onto rail cars, sounds familiar, shipped off to concentration camps. When they get there, Sean, the women are separated and forced into clinics for forced sterilization or forced abortions so that they can no longer have children. Many of the younger women are then married off to ethnic Han Chinese. So there's a racism element there so that they can then dilute their gene pool. I mean, the men are then shipped off to slave labor camps. And this is where it touches American companies. These are this forced labor, this slave labor, are producing cotton that Nike uses, are producing sugar that Coca-Cola uses, are producing raw materials and mines, slave labor mines that Intel uses for its computer chips. So all of these companies are complicit, and it shouldn't surprise anybody that all of these companies are what I'm calling genocide Olympic sponsors. At the same time, Sean, and this is where we're just so sick and tired of the hypocrisy. These are the same companies that want to boycott Georgia over its voter integrity laws, that want to, move the All-Star game for Major League Baseball, that want to, continue to preach social justice because it's padding their balance sheet here in the United States. At the same time, it's at the same time they're padding their balance sheet by ignoring basic human rights over in China.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back more with Congressman Mike Waltz. And as we continue with Congressman Michael Waltz, as we continue our discussion about the Chinese Olympics and the human atrocities that are happening with China, it's sad because what you're pointing out is true. This is genocide. And we're talking about, the Uyghur community in China, the ethnic Muslim population. And you're right about the Tibetans, how there's been systematic discrimination and persecution of them as well. It's become an issue now in the NBA also. It doesn't seem like anybody in the world cares that this is now ongoing. Why is that? Except
for very few, like Inez Cantor, now Mr. Freedom, as he changed his name to Freedom, the Boston Celtics basketball player. There's a few that are standing up.
No, there have been a few basketball players that haven't, and by the way, they've been punished for doing it, and they've been encouraged to stop.
That's right. But then on the other side of that, you have people like LeBron James that, again, wants to preach about social justice in the United States, but then enters into shoe deals with Chinese companies, not even American companies sourcing there, Chinese companies that are outright using slave labor. So the hypocrisy is just rank. And then, add to that, there's one other piece, Sean, that I don't think enough people are talking about. The IOC, when presented with all of these just gross and awful abuses, Hong Kong, COVID, the Uyghurs, they say, well, we don't do politics. That's not what the Olympics are about, and that's why we don't support moving the games or boycotts. Yet they seem to support it just fine when it came to apartheid in South Africa. Not only did they prevent any Olympic Games from happening in South Africa, they banned the South African Olympic team from participating in any Olympics anywhere in the world for nearly 30 years. So is that somehow morally better or worse than an ongoing genocide against Muslims? Do the oppression of the African American or the Africans in South Africa somehow better or worse than 1 million Muslims in concentration camps? Of course not. The difference is the money. NBC, is making billions and paying billions to the IOC, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Airbnb, all of them are drunk on Chinese money. And as Cantor said it best, no amount of gold medals is worth your values. And so I would ask these same athletes, and I worry about them as well as you do, Sean, but I would ask them, if the United States government had 1 million Muslims in a concentration camp, do you think the women's soccer team would be demanding to still compete? No, they would be protesting in the streets.
And by the way, you just haven't gotten to it. I think you've laid out an extraordinarily compelling case about how horrific this is, and it's hard to imagine that this exists in the year 2021, now soon to be 2022. But you haven't even mentioned the crackdown in Hong Kong, and you haven't mentioned the territorial ambitions with Taiwan and what they're calling reunification and flying fighter jets over Taiwan airspace. That's now ongoing, and my guess is probably sometime after the Olympics, Taiwan will be, quote, taken over by China.
Well, and look, and I haven't even mentioned the 5 million people dead around the world from COVID, or the fact that...
No, that's another good point, too.
Right, that they absolutely refuse to cooperate. But here's another point. Dictators love the Olympics. It gives them a global platform. Everybody there is turning a blind eye to their atrocities, and it emboldens them. We all know obviously what Hitler did after 1936, but it's important to point out that Putin invaded Crimea and Ukraine 2 months after the Sochi Olympics. So you're absolutely right to fear for Taiwan after the Olympics. Xi is going to be basically elected dictator for life by the Communist Party this summer. And I think between summer and when he knows Biden may go, is a very, very dangerous window. And why does that matter to everyday Americans? Well, if they get Taiwan, they basically control trade into Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, parts of Australia. It'll be
they've been outright threatening Japan and the U.S. They've actually criticized and threatened the U.S. over landing airplanes in Taiwan as if they have a say.
Well, that's right. Now, I was just at briefings in the Pentagon this morning, Sean, and expect that if we contest and defend that democracy in Taiwan, that we're talking about our electrical grid and other types of cyber attacks right here at home.
They have no problem showing off their hypersonic missiles that apparently can shoot nukes.
Which, by the way, is a first strike weapon. We cannot defend against it. But here's the damning thing, Sean, is all of that. Their Navy is larger than ours. They're launching more in space than us. The hypersonic is being bought and paid for with American money. Between our trade deficit, between our pension funds, Larry Fink and BlackRock, the hedge fund community, Wall Street, Hollywood, historians are going to look back on this and say, America was drunk on Chinese dollars. Hunter Biden, the son of the president, is absolutely corrupt on it, but it is our dollars that are flowing over and funding their military buildup, their Belt and Road Initiative, their debt diplomacy, and everything else. So my call to action as we head into the Christmas shopping season for everyone, when you see made in China, put it down. We wouldn't have a supply chain crisis if it was made in America.
I got to tell you, you've made the most compelling case of anybody that I have heard. And I think people need to understand what we're dealing with here. And you've done a great job doing that, Congressman. Congressman Mike Waltz, thanks for being with us, Florida's 6th District. Thank you, sir.